And I'm delighted also to welcome Hen Mazzig as well. Hen is a friend of mine of old, and Hen, founder of the Tel Aviv Institute, which is a think tank trying to combat online anti-Semitism, a veteran of the IDF and a humanitarian officer in the COGAT unit in the West Bank. COGAT stands for the Coordination of Government Activities in the Territories. Welcome along to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Hen. Now, I wanted to ask you, first of all, your job as a soldier was a bit different, wasn't it? It was looking after the locals and trying to be a friendly face of the IDF to the locals. Is that right?
Yeah, it was...
How did that go?
Quite challenging on all fronts, not only from the Palestinian side. So what the COGAT unit is doing is working as an intermediary between the Israeli authorities and the Palestinian civilians, since Israel still controls the West Bank. I served in Hebron, Ramallah, and Jerusalem. I also had some time in Gaza. And my focus was to work on the humanitarian aspect, on the civil aspect, building hospitals, roads, liaising with the UN, with the International Red Cross. We were facilitating the family visits of the Palestinian families that were convicted Palestinian terrorists held in Israeli prison. And according to the Geneva Convention, you have to allow family visits once a week. So we were running all of this operation. It was very interesting. The Red Cross was quite often very vocal when we were delayed, or if there was a 5 minutes delay in the access of the Palestinian families to see their family members in Israeli prisons. They would send out press release, they would make a lot of noise in the media and make sure that Israel would be held accountable if we were 5 minutes late to bring Palestinian families to see their loved ones. But on the other hand, we're seeing them completely silenced. I was
going to say, they're 70 days late actually seeing Israeli hostages in Gaza, and we have 137 still incarcerated, we hope, don't we? The Red Cross, where are you? Where have you been?
Yeah, I think that's such an important point, because the Red Cross, they keep saying that, they're doing everything they can. They don't want to provoke Hamas. I mean, for crying out loud, you don't want to provoke Hamas. What else can they do that they haven't done? You have to pressure Hamas, and they know that. I know the people that are working in the Red Cross. I worked with them on a daily basis for 5 years. I just don't think that they care about the hostages as much as they care about attacking Israel. It's almost like this DNA of all of this international organization. It's not about Palestinian civilians, because they don't care when Hamas is killing Palestinian civilians. They don't care that Palestinian civilians in Lebanon and in Syria and in Jordan are living under actual apartheid with no rights. They are held in refugee camps. They can't go to the same schools in Lebanon. But then when it comes to Israel, constantly outraged, and maybe it's because Israel is doing everything it can to improve constantly, and the other side just doesn't listen.
Which begs the question, and we promised to get an answer from Barak just as we went into the break. Barak, Israel being held to a different standard to other countries in prosecuting their wars.
I think definitely this is modern anti-Semitism. Modern anti-Semitism is about double standards, demonizing Israel, and disproportionate criticism of Israel. I don't mind if somebody criticizes Israel on a policy basis the way they would criticize any other nation. But, the irony of Zionism is it enabled anti-Semitism to mutate from an ethnic to nationalistic level. If somebody's intelligent and subtle, they won't say, I hate Jews, they'll say, I hate Israel. And as Martin Luther King says, they mean the same thing. But what you said, Hen, about Israel just trying to do better, right? It actually exposes the fact that Israel is a rational Western state. It exposes Israel to the vulnerability that the other side perceives it as not being rational and sophisticated, but weak to be exploited. I remember seeing this documentary called The Fog of War with former US Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, when he met Khrushchev decades after the Bay of Pigs crisis, and Khrushchev said to him that he was willing to undergo nuclear annihilation, right? And, being Western and being rational, thinking about cost-benefit analysis, he was shocked. McNamara was just shocked. And it's the same here with the Palestinians. For them, death is glorified, it's an ideal. The nationalism is predicated on genocide. So when they see Israel willing to make territorial compromises, which they interpret as weakness, according to game theory, they win and Israel loses.
Which brings us on to a debate between you gentlemen about the two-state solution. Now, it is, as you say, Barak, a pithy phrase. It sounds absolutely fantastic. And it sounds marginally better than the one-state solution, doesn't it? Where Palestinian ideals mean that they move into Israel and eventually a civil war breaks out and then the Jews are pushed into the sea, which would create just over 7 million refugees and, for example, a sort of Holocaust. And yet there are many people in Israeli society, Hen, who support a two-state solution. You're one of them, aren't you, Hen? Even today?
Yeah, absolutely.
But who are the reliable partners? Where's Hamas? They're not reliable partners. Right. They've said again, we're going to do this again, we're going to do this again, and they've done it again in the worst possible way. The Palestinian Authority, they're not elected. They had one election. They won't have another one. 88-year-old Mahmoud Abbas knows that Hamas would win over there, as Barak said with his figures earlier on in the show. Where's this two-state solution, Hen? Where is it?
We spoke about my military service as a humanitarian officer, and I think it gave me a better perspective on Israel, on this conflict, on working with different parties that have conflicting needs and having to serve everyone and trying to make peace. And maybe we'll start with the end. What is the alternative? What is the alternative for a two-state solution? So if we're talking about one-state solution, the question is, are Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza going to receive equal citizenship? Because otherwise it would be what our derogators are accusing us of, and I don't want Israel to turn into that. Israel is a democracy. I want to keep Israel as a democracy, and I don't think, as Barak said, I mean, we are held to different standards because we are in a different standard of governing and of a free society, and I want Israel to remain a free society, but we can't do it when we still controlling areas where Palestinians live in a different sets of rules. And it's not in Israel. Within Israel proper, Israel is, I think, is an example of democracy. Of course, not perfect, has a lot of work to do, but it is a democracy. But yeah, when I'm listening to people on the other side, I keep thinking, well, they're seeing this in the same way. They're saying, well, you know, like you just said, Abbas has been in power for so long. Yeah, Netanyahu has been in power for so long, even though so many Israelis... He was elected
though, wasn't he, recently?
Right, of course. Quite different, right? Yeah. The tactic is different. But yeah, I think that there must be alternative. The world needs to come together, and we need to help the Palestinians come out of this victimhood and the idea that they can't ever have a country of their own.
We're going to go to a call in just a moment, but Hen, who is the person across the table on the Palestinian side that's going to negotiate with you and your team on the two-state solution? There isn't one, is there?
There are young Palestinians that I'm hoping are seeing this, and we don't hear them enough. And I think there are. I know them.
You know that there are people.
I know that there are people out there. And just one word: I'm a Zionist. I believe in the right of Jews to our ancient homeland, but I can't advocate for the rights of the national rights of Jews while ignoring another people's right for national self-determination.
May I just interject? I think that you're ignoring the statistics on the Palestinian side by Birzeit University and the Khalil Shikaki polls, which shows heightened radicalization amongst the younger people. I think that, I know that you don't want to occupy another nation, but you're projecting your values onto the other, and your aspiration for peace is an abstraction.
That's Barak Sina, and that is Hen Mazzig, and we're being accused of a one-sided view, although we have two very different perspectives on the two-state solution. Let's get a third one in, with Syed in London. Good afternoon, Syed.
Yeah, hello, hi there. Yes, I'm the one who said that you have a very one-sided panel so far, with an IDF person and with a person advocating that Palestinians don't have a right of statehood.
Well, we believe in... these two gentlemen do have two very different views of the two-state solution, but fire away, please tell us what you think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think he was quoting at length about this poll of Palestinians. I wish he had the courage to actually quote the poll of the Israelis, who think that the Israeli government is not doing enough and should be using even more firepower against the Palestinians. So the Israeli side is also as radicalized, and that is why they have people who would be classified as fascists in their government. In fact, some of them are actually people who have charges like Ben Gvir for inciting racism. And they are people who are making genocidal comments about how Palestinians are animals and they don't deserve food, water, electricity. So the genocidal commentary coming out from the Israeli top leadership is deeply worrying. And that's why you see thousands and thousands of innocent Gazans being killed in ruthless attacks on literally a daily basis. But for these panelists, that doesn't matter because this is all proportional. I don't know what sense of proportionality these guys believe in. And
so, if you would like me to respond,
yes, please.
When Israel, no doubt the Israeli electorate has shifted to the right. The reason why it's shifted to the right is when it, after decades of ignoring the genocidal charter that Hamas has and which is culturally mainstream amongst Palestinian society, suddenly they think, oh my gosh, these people don't want territory, they don't want statehood, they have a zero-sum game genocidal aspiration, and nobody deserves a state. You need to work for a state. You need liberal governance. When you had immediate elections in the Palestinian, in Gaza, it straight away empowered Hamas over a decade and a half ago. When you had immediate elections in Lebanon, you empowered Hezbollah. There is a difference between liberalism and democracy. They're not synonymous with one another. The only thing that is in Western strategic interests is to see liberal democracies take root.
Hen, you're closer to Syed than Barak. What would you like to say?
I mean, I don't think I'm closer to any. Actually, both sides I think have a perspective that I do not share. On the one hand, with Barak, I disagree completely with the premise that because Palestinians are somehow backward or have genocidal aspirations, as you frame it, that they don't deserve self-determination, or that affect in any way their right for a statehood, or that they can't move out of the situation that they're at. And if we're looking at other Arab countries, we see where they are now and how they have progressed, and to the point that we have a peace agreement with Egypt and Jordan and Bahrain. I mean, those countries that we never thought we could reach an agreement with, but we have. And I'm hoping, I know that the public hasn't changed their mind, and I know that the public is very anti-Semitic in Arab worlds. I know it because my mom is from Iraq and my dad is from Tunisia, and they have been kicked out of those countries without anything but the clothes to their back. But I can't in the same breath say, okay, this is what happened, other people don't deserve these rights because of what they believe in.
I never said that the Palestinians are backwards, but you need a multi-generational process of denazification in the Gaza. You're talking about a Nazi philosophy that is mainstream. You can't ignore that.
But you hear what he's saying, the caller, he's saying the same thing. He says there's racism on the Israeli side, and he's right about some of the politicians that have made statements like we need to erase Gaza, which is disgusting and abhorrent, but we know it's condemned by the Israeli society. But we have those politicians, and we have radicalized groups within Israel.
You cannot draw an equivalence between the two. Israeli children do not study in their national curriculum if there are 6 Palestinians and you kill 2, how many do you have left? That is mainstream in Palestinian discourse and in their educational curriculum. There is no equivalence between the two.
With that part, I agree, but I think that we need to also be able to see the other side and understand that our view is our view, and this is one of the positions that we have. But they have rights, and they have, again, I really disagree, because I think that there is a way to promote human rights, promote equality, and in this land. And the solution is not to say, well, we need to, they don't have a right for a country because they have some anti-Semitic, racist ideas. In fact, I think that if they will have a country, maybe that will promote a change.
We'll go to more callers in just a moment. David in Glasgow will be waiting for us. But in fact, David in Glasgow is with us. Hello, David. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Jonny. Yeah. Listen, I've got a slight issue here with this whole how do we make peace. I had the privilege of looking after my grandchildren yesterday, and the oldest one, who's 9 and a bit, let's call it 10, she asked me the question because we were in a restaurant and she was just happened to glance the headlines of a newspaper. she asked me the question, why is Israel killing their own people? Yeah, because the headline was about the fact that this incident happened.
You're talking about the tragedy of the 3 hostages who were mistaken. Yes.
Correct, yes. Now, this is a 9-year-old just reading this headline, being confused by it, and asking me this very simple question. I couldn't answer that. I mean, when you talk about how do we make peace in the Middle East, the question, how do we get the young people to make peace? You know, because in simplicity terms, this is my 9-year-old granddaughter totally confused. Why is this happening? And I just couldn't explain it to her. I just said it was a tragic mistake, but why was it a mistake? And question after question, you know.
It is one of the darkest moments, if not the darkest moment, of very, very dark moments of this war. Hen, perhaps if you could come back on that for David.
Yeah, I mean, the question is, why did this war started? I think that's why it happened. Of course, mistakes happen, and it's tragic, and Israelis have been, I mean, the families, I spoke to the families of the people that were killed. I spoke to Iris, the mother of Yotam, and my heart was broken because I was hoping so badly that it's going to be released, and to know that this would happen in the middle of a war zone where Hamas is using hospitals and schools and dressed in civilian clothes, and Hamas terrorists in civilian clothes have detonated suicide bombing vests a few days before that on soldiers, killing soldiers. So soldiers in this situation, I mean, that's I served in the army, I've been to war, I know that it's hell, and I know that there's a fog of war, but it's very telling that the Israeli army has not even used the idea of fog of war, or saying that they're not taking full responsibility or blaming Hamas. They took full responsibility, and I think a society is judged not by its mistakes, but how it's reacting to it. So Israel has took responsibility, and it says that they're going to examine it thoroughly, but it's tragic. There's no way to explain it. But one question is, why are so many people that are such stance anti-Israel voices that have been advocating against Israel's right for the last 2 months now all of a sudden care about those hostages that they said that don't even exist, and now they care about them? It's only because Israel killed them. Otherwise they wouldn't care. They would say that they don't exist, they don't deserve rights, they've been treated well by Hamas. But it's very telling how all of a sudden there's an interest in those hostages.
That is Hen Mazzig. He is a senior fellow at the Tel Aviv Institute, also the founder of that. I'm going to say thank you very much to Barak Sina for your expertise in the first part of the show. Senior fellow at the Henry Jackson Society and associate fellow at the Royal United Services Institute. And we'll expand the question to you, 0344 499 1000, which David in Glasgow said, how am I going to explain this war to the younger generation? If you have answers or clues on that, plus your ideas for making peace in the Middle East, this is the platform to do it. This is Talk TV. Good afternoon. I'm Jonny Gould. And welcome along to How to Make Peace in the Middle East, Part 2, another version of this. And it's been great to have Barak Sina in the studio. We've got more guests coming up. Baroness Claire Fox on the pro-Palestine marches, what it means to our society in this country and how it might put the day of peace back still further. Claire comes up. We've got Jonathan Sacerdotti coming into the studio as well. The IDF has embargoed new video and pictures of yet another tunnel they have excavated and discovered. It's going to be available for us all to see in the world from 3 o'clock. Jonathan will have that here. And for those of you listening on the radio, if you can check out YouTube later or you can switch to Talk TV to see that, it really will be worth seeing. We'll also talk to Benjamin Anthony, the CEO of Miriam Institute, who once scribed something called the New State Solution, which over time things have overtaken it somewhat, like the Abraham Accords, which looked a little bit similar to it. So we'll talk to Benjamin in just a moment, but it is, as always, my privilege to have Hen Mazzig in the studio. Hen is an advocate for the two-state solution. He's a former Kogat soldier, which was the humanitarian version of the IDF, trying to coordinate Geneva Convention ideas between Palestinian civilians in the West Bank and their incarcerated prisoner cousins and friends and family in Israeli jails for carrying out terrorist activities. But also, Hen, you are a terror victim yourself. Just 12 years old, you went for an ice cream and you were blown out of it by a suicide bomb.
Yeah, I grew up in Petah Tikva. It's a small city outside of Tel Aviv, and when I was 12, it was the heights of the Second Intifada. I think my story is one that many Israelis share a similar experience. I walked into an ice cream shop near my house, and as I arrived there, the place blew up. There was a grandmother and her granddaughter, 2 years old, were eating ice cream, and a Palestinian suicide bomber walked inside and exploded himself, killing both of them.
Oh.
And a few minutes away, I would probably not be sitting here with you today.
And you went through the window, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, no, I was just...
You were nearby?
Yeah, nearby. I was just
Right.
blown back, but not...
I always remember, Dr. Inat Wilf, who was on the show in the first episode of How to Make Peace in the Middle East. She said going out for a cup of tea in Tel Aviv at that time was like an act of defiance. Was it really that tense all the time?
Absolutely. Every day you would hear a new terror attack in the news, something else. I mean, in a cinema, in a cafe, in a restaurant. It was a time that I remember being terrified. I think that's a lot of the trauma that my mom have until today. She always wanted to find out where I am and check on me. I think it all comes from that.
That might just be inbred, being a Jewish mother.
The Jewish mother, right.
Not sure, but... but thank goodness. And of course, when you went to war, I would imagine that made it even more acute for her. Yeah,
I think that Israelis are growing up, like me, young Israelis, with so much fear and I don't know if fear is the right word, but just knowing that the future is uncertain, that you never know if you're going to go out and something might happen. I think October 7th really cemented that for us, that the sense of safety is something that we are not used to having. But it's very telling that Israelis still feel safer in Israel than they are in anywhere else in the world.
That is incredible and true. Rabbi Leo D said it to me when he came here. Rabbi Leo D, who lost his wife and daughters to a terror attack, said, we are armed and we know what we're facing, and he feels safer at home in Israel, and he lives, I think, in the West Bank, than he does, for example, in Hove or London. What is that, Hen?
Yeah, I think it's a question that your viewers and non-Jews around the world should ask themselves. It's not a question that we need to answer. How come Jews feel more safe in Israel, where they are being bombed, attacked, killed, murdered, kidnapped, slaughtered, abused in such horrific ways? How come they feel safer in Israel than they are in the rest of the world? Why am I, personally, I can share with you, living in London has been traumatic for me in the last 2 months. It's terrifying to leave my house. I always walk around looking at people and asking myself, have they been on the march? Have they called for the genocide of my people? It's a constant worry that you have. People that have been my friends, me and my partner's friends for so long, we have cut connection with because of their anti-Semitic hate, because they haven't checked on myself or on my family, because they don't see us as human. And that's what troubles me the most, and I think it's something that troubles many Jews today.
0344 499 1000. Let's go to the calls now and speak to Colin in Rugby. Hello, Colin.
Hello, Jonny.
Hi.
I've spent a bit of time in Israel on business. I'm sort of retired, so I've had a 30, 40-year long business career. And something that struck me at the time, because I was able to, in the period 96 to, around 98, you were able to go to the West Bank. And I used to go to kibbutzes where there were quite radical Jews and others which were much less strict than that. And you saw a great deal of the opinions of the time. Things have gotten much, much worse now, of course. My point is that we'll never get anywhere whilst the Palestinians only believe that they've got to eradicate the Jewish state, this river to the sea narrative. And similarly, there are some changes that need to be made in the state of Israel, which is this constant importation of people to keep the numbers of Jews and Arabs within the state, in positive with an excess of Jews. So there has to be compromise. But the biggest problem has been, on the Palestinian side, is a complete lack of decent leadership. We had Yasser Arafat at one time. Then that all fell apart when the Israeli Prime Minister was assassinated back in '98. And it goes on like this. And in many ways there is a spread which is similar to Northern Ireland, but this is much more difficult and intractable to solve.
Indeed, because it's it's to the nth degree, isn't it? It is a total victory for the Palestinian extremists, isn't it?
That's right. The only way that this is going to get diffused is to have this sort of commission or this meetings of people similar to Northern Ireland, but I don't know where that's going to come from. It's certainly not going to come out of the Biden administration, who bolstered the stock of Iran by giving it $80 billion worth of oil sales. There was much more chance of getting peace with Trump, who actually starved the Iranian state.
Colin, thank you very much for your points. That's the critical thing that Colin just mentioned here, that the Oslo Accords effectively sued Israel to try and find peace, whereas the Abraham Accords and the Peace to Prosperity Plan scribed by Jason Greenblatt sues the Palestinians to try and get to the peace table. Colin's onto something there, isn't he?
In a way, I think that the Abraham Accords, while I'm a big supporter and I think they are amazing, it's a type of an agreement of peace between countries and not by people. And I think the important part is how we make peace between people. And in Israel, there are so many organizations working to bring Palestinians and Israelis together. And I think this type of conversations are going to make a difference. And I think that the bottom line is that young people are the ones that are going to lead that. And so far we have leaders that have been in their chairs for decades.
88-year-old ones.
Yes. And their ideas and what they see as a future, I don't think they think about us, about young people, about children that are just born into this reality. For them, it's how much they're going to make and if they're going to keep their chairs. I mean, according to foreign reports, Mahmoud Abbas is making $1 million a month. And Netanyahu also has his concerns, not to compare the leaders, of course, but just to note that older generations that have grew up with wars and have a different perspective on this and probably care less about the next 30 years that they have left in their lives as much as we do about the future of ourselves and our kids and what country we want to see. There's much more energy with young people.
On the subject of old leaders and who probably are serving the end of their time in their autumn, possibly even winters of their careers, let's talk to Christopher in Kent, who says that leaders aren't trying to engineer peace at all. Hello, Christopher. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Johnny. Thanks for having me on. I have to say straight away, I agree with a two-state solution. I'm no expert like the vast majority out there in the world, but like you, similar age, I've grown up with this. It's not alone out there as a conflict that's just gone on all my life. And I'd love to find a solution. I'm sure most of us would. I wonder whether it's a bit of an elephant in the room, perhaps, but I feel that Netanyahu has played a major part in bringing about this awful tragedy recently, and it's been on the sort of table for a while. I feel that outsiders, the US particularly, who we know are the major ally and have a huge amount of influence, have not done anything like enough for a long time. I think back to Clinton, before him Carter, who really pushed the boat out. I know there's a lot of cynics out there who think Carter was a waste of time, Clinton was this and that, but you have to take your hat off. They tried and tried and tried so hard to bring about peace, whatever their reasons, their rationale, but it unfortunately failed. They got close, very close, from what I can understand. We need that now. We need some...
Right. Well, they got very close, and then the Palestinians walked away, which is basically what keeps on happening. And now we had the Trump administration who basically said that the Palestinians shouldn't have a veto on Israeli-Arab progress, which is basically what the Abraham Accords was.
Jonny, do you really feel in your heart that it was the Palestinians, entirely Arafat, that spoiled that deal?
Well, I'm going to ask that question. Let's have Hen Mazzig answer that question, Hen.
I do think that it was the Palestinians that pulled out from this deal. I think that the Palestinian leadership was... I mean, do you remember the pictures of Ehud Barak? Ehud Barak these days that is still speaking up in support of the Palestinians. So I do think that it was the Palestinian leadership that has pulled out. I don't think Palestinians today need to be held accountable for the mistakes of their leaders, the same way that I don't think that Israelis should be held accountable for the mistakes of Netanyahu, or that Americans are all Trump. Of course not. And we know that leaders often get into those positions because of their rhetoric. But with that being said, I mean, the Palestinians have been rejecting peace over and over again. So that's factual. It's not even what I feel like. It's history.
And Hen, they're doing that because they want a total victory, because they believe in history that eventually their numbers and Jewish history, their connection to the land, will be severed by something in the future. That's what they believe, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think this belief is something that Jews had in Israel when we first started the country. Mm-hmm. We thought that the British mandate does not belong there, and we'll do whatever we can, including bombing the British mandate soldiers, to make sure that they would get out of our land. And I think that's the failed proposition that the Palestinians have, because they think that if they'll just commit enough crimes and violence against innocent Israelis and young Israelis, maybe we would decide to move away. But we're not moving away, because we are where we are from. This is our home. We have nowhere else to go. I can't go back to Iraq or Tunisia. I don't know. I don't think I want to. But you know, this is where this is the only place we belong to. It's not, Israel is not an empire, and I think that's what people fail to understand.
That's Hen Mazzig. Thank you ever so much for coming in today, and it's been a pleasure.